Yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about the benefits of having a permanent copy of Christian Prayer, the single volume. I am I find using the online apps and stuff very legitimate, but there are a couple of things that I think it would benefit somebody to have a single volume and to be able to use it. And I've set up some videos for explanation of how I do certain things, and keeping in mind that really you can't really do it wrong when you do it by yourself. However you do it is just fine. And there's a lot of things that we do that turns out are actually kind of optional. But that aside, I want to show why I prefer to have an actual physical copy to keep with me. It really becomes kind of a one-stop resource for not only worship but also meditation and stuff like that. And it also becomes kind of a diary for what I do, and I'll show you how I do that. Now, my copy of Christian Prayer is a one of a kind. I had bought one from the Catholic Book Publishing Company or something, and the binding fell apart. So I sent this to a bookbinder and asked them to add a couple of things that you're not going to be able to get, by buying one in a bookstore by itself. But I'll show you how I have mine set up with not the ribbons today, but actually instead the tabs and all that I use. So opening it up, I just have this little sticky note here that I put on here for the gifts of the Holy Spirit and the fruits of the Holy Spirit. But some of the things then that I asked them to do for me is to put in some note pages in the beginning. And so what I've done here is I've written out an examen, but I've also added some stuff into the steps of the examen. I've added some stuff from Stoic philosophy. And I have my favorite verse here from Numbers 6. The Lord bless you and keep you, make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. Lord lift up his countenance upon you and grant you his peace. I just think that's a very poetic and a beautiful verse. On the next page over here, I have that I use this to help me before I go to reconciliation. I have the Ten Commandments, Catholic version. Items here about loving your neighbor and the precepts of the church, and I use that as sort of a examination of conscience before I go in. Here I've written out the act of contrition because every time I have it memorized, then a couple of weeks later, month later, I go to confession and I've forgotten a line, so I have it there. I have here also some notes about the rosary and the different mysteries for it and stuff. And then the other side I have the Hail Holy Queen and the Rosary Prayer. I'm going to be putting on this page here, I'm going to write out instructions for the Chaplet of Divine Mercy. That way I don't have to have an extra handout put in there, but I just put that in there for now. Thing is, I have trouble memorizing stuff. It used to be real easy, but it's not so easy anymore. And so I put this in here and then I write it in here and then it'll be good. Here I have some notes. I had a class one time by a deacon, Steve, who talked about counseling and some of the things that he said to do and to not do. And I put that in there as a kind of a, think about, really not about counseling, but when I fail to live up to the Catholic ideal of treating other people, this is something that helps me. And I'll figure out something else to put in here as well. Now, the thing about the single volume, it has an abbreviated instruction. And I recommend everybody read this. It gives you a little bit of the history, and the intent behind doing the morning and evening prayer. The single volume is really set up for morning and evening prayer, and it talks about it. These things will pretty soon be out of date. Now when it comes into the calendar, this is something that I think is really helpful to me, again, because I don't remember everything so easy. But like in January, I write out the holy days of obligation and things like on Epiphany to remind me to wear a star. Here I have the 6 holy days of obligation. But there's some things like presentation of the Lord as a feast, and one of the things that you find is that if it falls on a Sunday, this can actually replace, in this case, the 4th Sunday in ordinary time. Remind myself in March and the 1st Sunday in Lent, wherever that falls, the rite of sending for the new people. Some notes here about Lent and stuff. And every time something happens, I put it in there. Okay, May, a decade of the Rosary on Sunday, because we dedicate this to Mary. We'll have our first communion and the crowning of Mary. I don't have to remember it. It's right there. All right. Now, what I will be doing is certain people that were important to me on my spiritual journey, what I will do is I'm going to start adding their birthdays as an optional sort of memorial thing. And what I would like to be able to do is after their passing, that's to remind me then that on that day I could do an office of the dead for them. All right. And again, there's just little notes all along the way. Again, in October, decade of the Rosary. Now, last month, for instance, we've got the last Sunday in September, we have a procession and a potluck. We have a very strong Filipino community in our parish, and that's an important day. And so that'll remind me to do that. And their potluck is amazing. If you ever get a chance to go to a Filipino potluck, I really recommend it. Okay. Something that's useful for people that are, working the divine offices. Here's some general principles for doing it, and here it starts with the introduction, all right, and gives you some ideas here. But here, the morning and evening prayer, here's just how it tends to run. Okay, it's not telling you how to do each of those, but it's just giving you an overview of that. Same thing with daytime prayer and night prayer, which is in here. Here we've got the format of the offices on this side, and I've written some additional notes in there for myself to do those. Right? You see Sundays comes first because Sundays are all solemnities. Okay. Anyway, so we start out here. Okay, now we move into the proper seasons. But what I want to show here then are the tabs that I use. Now, when doing the invitatory, generally speaking, we use Psalm 95, and I've got that highlighted, and I have a little tab here for it. Now, there are other psalms we can use for the invitatory. Psalm 24, so I have a tab for that, and Psalm 100, which I like Psalm 100 the most. Okay, there's some things in 95 that talk about, they made me angry, and so a lot of times I'll use Psalm 100. It's just nicer for me. And I had to, in this case, I put a little dot there so that I know that that's actually the end of the psalm. It doesn't continue on the next page. And then there's Psalm 67. Stuck there a little bit. Again, I highlight where they start, and I got that tab. During the office, in the morning office, okay, we've got the Benedictus. I've got that highlighted, and I got a little tab there. Some people will use cards, so rather than go to that, but it's self-contained. It's all right in there, and I put a little cross there to remind me to cross myself before I start it. Same thing here with the Magnificat. Okay, got my cross there to remind me and highlight. Yeah, Magnificat, I once said in an earlier video, I was thinking of something else that said, oh, Magnificat means greatness or something. No, Magnificat means he, she, or it proclaims. And in Latin, it's the first word, excuse me, of, this verse. So that's there. So I've got that. Again, I got my extras. Now here we're into our 4-week Psalter. Okay. And, well, that's all. We know how to use that. Now, very rarely will I actually do daytime prayer. I do it, but not very often, and not in any predictable schedule. But the single volume has a daytime prayer option. You can do that. Now, if you do one prayer during the day, okay, they've got basically a setup for the week for doing that. But if you want to do a second one at any point, for instance, during the day, there is this complementary psalmody, and I have a little tiny tab there, which I have never used. But if I were to use another prayer during the day, a second or a third, then we would come and use this one, and it's a very short setup. All right. Then I have a tab for night prayer. I only use this if I travel because on my bedside I have a separate booklet just for nighttime prayer, and it's pretty useful. All right, so we got that. Now, some of the ones that I do every once in a while is, for instance, if you go to Saturday Mass, quite often they'll have a day, they'll set it aside for the Blessed Virgin Mary, and there's an office there, all right, and you can do that, all right. Now, Office of the Dead, so we have times during the year when we do that, and sometimes I do it when I just learn that somebody has passed away. For my own sort of reflection here, there's a reading, say you're doing an Office of the Readings. I don't do this, but the readings are useful, and so here's the first reading, and in this case it's got an option here from the first letter to the Corinthians. Okay, so I have a little 1 there for first reading, and here I have a little 2 for the second reading, and here's the non-biblical readings. Okay, this one from St. Anastasius of Antioch, and there are a couple more you can use. But if I do an Office for the Dead, it's always been a morning prayer, okay, and so I have this here. What I may do is I'll just do a reading, from 1 and 2 as a way of setting my mind in it and do it properly, and then I may do an Office. Okay, I have another tab here for the section of hymns, and I rarely do the hymns because I don't sing, and I know, for instance, that this note is a C, but I don't know what that C sounds like, in my voice, so I just don't do it. Okay. All right, so there's a whole bunch of things in there, and if I'm up at the diocese and we're doing morning or evening prayer and Sister Lois is there, then I have a look that I can go to. All right, here is a tab for the Office of the Readings, which I don't do, but it's there for if you want. Now, the last bit of tabs that I have is from the Office of Readings, and I think if you were to use the 4-volume, that's the benefit, really, is to have a whole series of readings. Now, to be honest, I usually use the app on a day, and I'll do the readings on the app. That is a very, very useful tool in one's spiritual journey. But we have an abbreviated version here, and in the single volume, and they cut through to the essence of it. And what I've done is kind of marked it up, I don't even know what to do, in parallel. So we have biblical readings. In this case, the year starts with Advent, and so we have biblical readings for Advent, and that is this first tab here for me. Okay, now non-biblical readings, I have, right behind that a tab to give me the non-biblical readings for Advent season. And this does a selection of readings for all of them. And here the next one is Christmas, and I can come to back behind it, the non-biblical readings for Advent, and for Christmas. All right. And then, we have Lent, the third section. Biblical readings for Lent. Okay. Non-biblical readings for Lent. We go to the next one, Easter. Right. Okay, non-biblical for Easter. And then we have ordinary time, biblical readings, and right behind that, non-biblical readings for ordinary time. Now, if there's something else, sometimes they give you the option to go and look up poems, and there's a short selection of poems in here. I don't read this on my own, but I put a little tab there. Sometimes you just want a little bit of a change, and it says you could look up a poem. And so it has just a short, selection of poems. All right. This I've never used. I don't know how to use it. Not going to try to talk through it. So I have a little thing here about theological reflection, a class that I had taken one time, and I thought this was important. Things to, think about, experience and culture and tradition, but, how do these work together, and things that you can do when reflecting on something. I have here also, in the formation program that I'm taking part in, we're talking about the different aspects of our training, the human, the intellectual, the spiritual, and the pastoral. And here's some stuff that I had written down. And every once in a while I look at this and kind of try to right my ship, because trying to follow each of these is, it takes energy, and it's so easy to slip up. And so I reorient myself by reading this. Here, now these I asked him to put in. These are like little document protectors, and so you can slip stuff in and out. What I have in here right now, and I'll figure out, I'll probably write this down somewhere. This one is from a presentation that my pastor gave. I thought it was very insightful. And so I've written down notes, and I use this to think about it and reflect on what he did. And I've got the act of contrition in Spanish. I'm learning that. Okay, how to do the rosary in Spanish. I've got that in there. I can just pop that out. There's one in English. Here's another note page that I could write something down. Here is the thing that I just carry with. When thinking about the mysteries, for instance, in this case, the joyful mysteries. First one being the Annunciation, and here's some things to pray for or to meditate on while meditating on that mystery. And I've got that I've made this into a little fold out front and back. And again, one of these things, I can't remember it all, and so I use that as a way to keep me online. And here I've grabbed an envelope. It's for All Souls Day. I've got to take care of that and put that in. So that's the series of tabs. It's quite a bit, but I find myself going to it every once in a while. Right now I'm doing these readings from ordinary time, both biblical and non-biblical. And it's with the tabs, I've got everything that I could look for. Goes in conjunction with the ribbons, and I've spoken about that before in other videos. So hopefully this can give you some ideas on how to take your breviary and make it, a true companion to your Bible, whichever translation you prefer to use. Thank you so much.